8 beef cattle, 36 sheep, 36 pigs and 550 poultry birds. That's how many animals the average Briton eats over an average lifetime. That is a lot, isn't it? But what is the alternative? Maybe we don't kill any animals and don't eat any meat? But if we're honest, complete abstinence is extremely unrealistic for a lot of people. But can we just carry on like this? What does science say about it? Should we eat less meat? What does this do to the environment, to the animals, to our health? I'm going to talk about this and more in today's video. Meat as a food. Meat as a food is actually a cool thing. It contains important macronutrients such as protein and fat. It has minerals and vitamins. Buy one, get it all. Okay, it lacks carbohydrates, but that's not a problem because our body can also get energy from other nutrients. And protein and fat are rich in energy as well. Meat consists of up to 25% of protein, and that is important for growth, repair, and maintenance in the body, especially for bones and muscles. In terms of the quantity and quality of protein in meat, meat does particularly well. Compared to other foods such as cheese or nuts, meat has a particularly high protein content, and animal protein is absorbed more quickly by the body than by protein-rich plants such as soy. Okay, so that sounds like meat is a great food then, right? Protein. There are two options for our intake. So we have two options for protein intake. Option 1. We grow soy, harvest it, process it, sell it, and prepare it. Bang! Enough protein. Or we grow soy, harvest it, put it in a big barn. The cattle eat it and grow. The cattle are processed and sold and prepared. Since the beginning of this video, more than 200 animals have been slaughtered. Worldwide, per year, we slaughter 302 million cattle, 573 million sheep, 656 million turkeys, 1.5 billion pigs, 68.8 billion chickens. In total, that's more than 72 billion animals. And 23% of the meat could even be produced for the bin because we don't eat it at all. And we eat more and more meat because when wealth increases, more of meat is eaten. We also eat more and more meat because it's so cheap. In the 1950s, you had to pay much more of your salary for a kilo of beef. So much so that today we would have to pay around 70 pounds for a kilo of beef. It is a fact, our meat consumption is extremely high, and this has an impact on animal husbandry, it has an impact on the environment, an impact on our diet and health and the price. Everything interacts. Animal husbandry, it is that difficult. The more meat we eat, the more difficult it is to keep animals. We regularly hear about meat scandals. Nevertheless, most of us buy and eat meat. And of course, you can't tell by looking at the sausage what's going on. So what would happen if it looked like this in the refrigerated counter? Even the term production animal shows that humans have culturally placed themselves above nature and animals. And this is represented by the way we keep them. The more animals per area we keep, the higher the yield. For the protection of animals and their health, there's something called the Codes of Recommendations for the Welfare of Livestock. But there's no legally binding box size for beef cattle, for example. And for slaughter animals, this means that many animals have to live together in a small space. So many animals that they cannot live out their natural behavior. The combination of a lack of space, stress, wrong nutrition, and lack of activity often leads to harmful behavior towards other animals, something that is almost never observed in nature. What is often used as a countermeasure? Trimming the beaks of chickens and docking the tails of pigs. If we were to eat less meat, there would be a need for fewer animals overall. The space per animal could increase. Some husbandry conditions could theoretically be improved, but this is also a task for the politicians. They would have to restrict problematic mass factory farming. That would not only make a big difference for the animals, but for the entire environment. How harmful is meat? You still remember this graphic I showed you? It's no surprise that this diversion also has a greater impact on the environment. The food sector already accounts for 26% of global emissions, and meat and fish account for more than half of this. The climate aspect is particularly interesting if you calculate it on the gram of protein, because that is what we primarily want to eat when we eat meat. To put it bluntly, the weekly protein requirement generates either 200 kilograms of CO2 or not even 2 kilograms. It depends on whether we eat beef or peas. And another example. This is how many greenhouse gases are behind a portion of spaghetti bolognese, and this is how many greenhouse gases are behind spaghetti made with soy mince. This says 1 kilo of CO2 per portion. Land use. CO2 is not the only problem for the environment. Animal husbandry and feed consume large areas of land and water, especially when intensive farming takes place. Small and large ecosystems are lost and biodiversity decreases. So far, humans have converted half of the usable and habitable landmass into agricultural land. Of this, 77% is used only for the livestock industry. With less animal husbandry, less land would be needed. Without it, of course, it would even be more obvious. Water usage. Meat production not only consumes space, but a lot of water. 1 kilo of beef requires about 15,000 liters of water. 1 kilo of pulses, such as soy, requires more than 3 times less water. The bottom line is greenhouse gases, space requirements, water consumption. Sooner or later, environmental degradation and climate change will become expensive. So let's talk about a concept called the true cost. The price we pay for food in the supermarket is actually too low. This is because food production causes environmental, climate, and health damage that we as a society have to pay for at a later date. Some think that we should make these costs more visible. They call them the true costs, that is, the true costs of food. A study by the company True Cost for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations comes to the conclusion that beef in particular should be significantly more expensive. They say that we should pay an additional €9.34 for each kilogram of beef produced in Europe, which is roughly 7.9 pounds. So the greater the consumption, the more intensive the animal husbandry, the cheaper the meat, the more the environment suffers. Nutrition and health. Let's now look at nutrition and health. We remember that meat is an all-rounder, so it contains a lot of protein. But that's what dried soybeans, peas, and nuts provide too. So what else does meat surprisingly have to offer besides a lot of protein? Vitamins. There's vitamin B12, which is only found in animal foods. Vegans have to take supplements to get enough vitamin B12. But meat eaters also have to watch out. Some types of meat contain only small amounts of vitamin B12. If you eat mainly chicken, you can cover your protein requirements, but you won't be able to get enough vitamin B12. You would need more than 600 grams of chicken every day. Meat does contain other vitamins, but the really relevant amounts are only found in offal. By the way, in certain studies, meat eaters even show nutrient deficiencies, for example, for vitamin D, E, calcium, and magnesium. And more meat often means less fiber, which is found mainly in fruit, vegetables, and mushrooms, and is important for health. For some people, therefore, eating less meat and more vegetables can actually provide them with a better supply of nutrients. So, do vegetarians live healthier lives? Do vegans live longer? There are countless studies on this, but the answer is it's not so easy, because nutritional studies are always a quite difficult thing. It's impossible to say whether meat consumption or smoking or too little exercise or other factors play a role in poor health. If you take these factors into account and look at many studies together, it often turns out that meat is associated with a higher risk of illness. More specifically, red meat and especially processed meat are a problem. The risk of diabetes, colon cancer, cardiovascular disease increases with higher meat consumption. Or there seems to be an association between eating a lot of processed meat and an increased risk of breast cancer. Antibiotics are another issue. Due to the large number of animals in a small space, antibiotics are constantly used in factory farming. That alone would not be so tragic at first, but it can be dangerous if resistant germs build up due to the constant use of antibiotics. If these are then transferred to humans via meat, they can jeopardize the success of treatment with antibiotics. In summary, this means that less meat and better animal husbandry can reduce the risk of some diseases. What could the future look like? Fortunately, the market for plant-based meat alternatives is growing. Finally, there is the dream of clean meat from the lab. You get real but vegetarian meat, so to speak, because the cow is still kept but is no longer killed for the steak. But this is still a dream of the future. But for now, what options are there? For the animals and the environment, it would be best if we all stopped eating meat. I mean, that's no question. But that's not realistic, especially not worldwide. But carrying on as before is not an option either, because we have really taken consumption to extremes. And the priority for many people is cheap and in bulk. How would it be if we ate less meat? If we eat less meat, fewer animals are needed. That would mean less environmental impact, fewer farming problems, and our health could also benefit. The price of meat should be fair and therefore much higher. How does that sound to you? Could you start eating less meat or maybe even think of becoming a vegetarian? Thank you for watching my video today. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something, and maybe go and talk to friends and family about this, about their meat consumption, if maybe they could eat less meat. Give it a try. It would be great if you could leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and or leave me a comment. Thank you. Bye bye, and stay curious.